and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another tremendous installment from very high above all the insipid and puerile forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. We finally made it. It's Friday. It's been a long week if you hadn't figured it out yet, but today it's Open Line Friday. That's right, my friends. Open Line Friday. This is the day where I put this program under extraordinary risk. You see, normally, you kind of have to talk about what's on my mind. I mean, it's my show. The reason you listen to it is to listen to what I think of things. Not on Friday. Friday, you are in control of the entire shoot. Well, that's not entirely true. You're in charge of your portion of the show. Whatever you want to talk about, we'll talk about.
You have an at bat.
Yeah, well, it's true. It's true. You do have it at bat, not necessarily 3 strikes, but though we might want to institute that rule. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, if you do want to be part of the program.
If that were true, I'd have been out a long time ago.
I think we probably all would be. But if you do want to be part of the show, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. Whatever's on your mind, go ahead and give me a call. And we'll talk about it.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
You leave it. Whatever's on your mind, that's a little too broad a subject,
it is,
my friend.
But I have you to push the mute button. Actually, I have the mute button today. But, you know.
Well, I have 2 or 3 downline from that. So one of us will hit it.
One of us will get it right. So anyway, go ahead and give me a call if you want to talk and be part of the program. We've got kind of a busy show today. We have in the studio, well, both of our guests are going to be in the studio. We have a candidate for House District, 8? 9? 9, Exie Brown. And then at the top of the hour, candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives, Steve Freeze, will be in the studio. Can't wait to talk to him. I don't know that much about him except for what I get in the mail. Yeah. But other than that, I really don't know too much about him at all.
We'll get to an interview with Exie there, but in the meantime, he might just chime in whenever he feels the urge.
Whatever.
Because he gets bored easily, and if he gets bored, bad things.
How could you get bored on this program?
Well,
I mean, really.
It's not really that, but there are all these guitars behind him.
This is true.
And he might just.
Let's not do that. I mean,
not me. You're going to have a problem with.
Well, I mean, it's my audience. It's true. All right. So anyway, lots to do on the show today. Exie Brown and Steve Freeze. We'll talk to both of them in a while. But first, to the cow pie. All of the redcoats are worried to death about purity tests. Now, I don't exactly know what this purity test thing is. Because the Republican Party platform has been around since, well, there has been a Republican Party, and pretty much political parties measure your adherence to it. Maybe more so Republicans than Democrats, but I think all political parties do that. How do you? What determines that you're a member of this party or not?
Most businesses do it. They have a mission
Yeah.
statement or something like that.
Almost all of them
it's a
do.
clarification about this organization. It's a private organization. This is what we stand for.
Right, right. And the platform is just a list of fundamental truths about the world we live in. And, if you believe in those things, well, then you are a Republican. And if you don't, well, then you're a redcoat, and you should go investigate some other party, whether it be the Green Party, be a fan of Ralph Nader, or the Democrat Party, be in favor of men becoming women and women becoming giraffes. And I mean, if you believe in that stuff. But anyway, a lot of the people that claim to be Republicans that are, quote unquote, running as a Republican are very concerned about purity tests. And this is something that's been around since I started the program, definitely, way before that. And it is the old Ronald Reagan rule that we agree on the big issues. And on the smaller things, we agree we agree on 80% of them, and we'll worry about the 20% later. In Wyoming, we often refer to this as the Mike Exie rule, but as with all things fundamental, there's always attempts to water it down. Well, they're not really platforms; they're aspirational, really. They're goals. If you talk to Gail Simmons, it's just a goal. It doesn't mean anything you have to abide.
Why would you do that?
Well, you shouldn't. But that is how, in her first appearance on Cowboy State Politics in 2020, she referred to the Republican Party platform as a list of goals. And then in a subsequent interview with the Pravda on the Platte, she then said that they were, they're really just aspirational. They don't really mean anything. Now, the truth is that members of the Republican Party spend a great deal of time discussing the platform. You see, it used to be like 50 pages long and nobody ever read it, much like the Constitution. And then members of the State Central Committee boiled it down to 23 planks. And to be very clear, included in that committee were a bunch of redcoats. In fact, members of the Frontier Republicans were in that committee and helped craft the Republican Party platform. And what it turned into was, instead of 50 pages, 23 planks that are timeless truths, is what we call them. And things like, that we believe in life from the moment of conception till natural death. We believe in the Second Amendment, small government, lower taxes, private property rights, all of those things, and there's 23 of them. And if you're a Republican, and I got to be frank with you, if you disagree with any of those, there's a serious problem.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be, I'm going to be accused of being too extremely right-wing. But the truth is, if you're a Republican and you look at that list and there's anything on there that you disagree with, well, then you're probably not a Republican. One of those that comes up a lot is the question of life. In fact, Sandbags Newsom put a post on social media. And let's see here. It's not no. Okay, so she's complaining about the platform itself, or the pledge. So here's what she says. Go ahead and show it to him, Ken. The Park County GOP's proposed purity test for precinct candidates is a flashing warning sign. This isn't about principles. It's about control. And when a party starts policing who's pure enough to participate, it shuts out neighbors, silences dissent, and weakens our entire community.
Well, that's the point.
That's the point, right? That's the whole reason why we have it, so that you can weed out who is actually a Republican and who is just pretending to be
It
one.
should be pointed out that the vote for adopting that platform was unanimous.
It was, even the first one.
Yes, it
with
was
the Frontier
unanimous.
Republicans.
And now they want to come back and start saying we got problems with it because, well, you figure out why.
Well, I mean, it's because they're not Republicans. And see, here's the telltale sign. And we'll do this with our candidates today, just a little bit. Don't let me forget Exie. I will ask you that question. But with the platform, we say that you should agree with 80% of it. And if there's 20% of it, okay, we can deal with those. But ask one of them, ask one of these redcoats, which which 20% of the party platform do you disagree with? Now, 20% of 23 is 5. It's actually 5 and change, but 5 planks in the platform you could disagree with and still be considered a Republican. Now, are you
Not
going?
by me.
Well, not by me either, but according to this 80-20 rule, and so that's not that high of a bar. You would think that people like Eric Barlow would be able to clear that one, but even he has problems. I mean, it goes back to his name. I mean, it's what an unfortunate name for a politician, Barlow. I mean, how low could you possibly set it? But anyway, there's a piece in the Cowboy, and this one's entitled "Park County Republican Party Sends Platform Loyalty Tests to GOP Candidates," as if this is some sort of breaking news. Let me read you the opening paragraphs, and then we'll talk about it. Republican candidates for office in Park County received a letter warning them if they don't commit to backing at least 80% of the GOP platform, they won't receive an endorsement or support from the party. This is not, well, I don't know who got their grammar wrong, but it says "they" is not a purity test, it reads. Probably a typo on their part. So this is not a purity test, says a letter to the Republican candidates from Park County partisan offices, warning them that if they don't commit to backing at least 80%, they won't be considered a Republican. The state GOP passed a set of new bylaws in April, which requires county and state committee iterations of the party to vet candidates for office on their commitment to the platform and demonstrated loyalty to the party's principles. The Park County GOP's vetting committee chair, Richard Jones, dispatched his letter and survey to multiple candidates this week. Responses are due next Wednesday. Now, the truth is, this is nothing new. Local parties have for years sent out various forms of a platform pledge to candidates. The one we have in Sheridan County, it appears to be kind of extensive, but it's not really. It lists out the party platform, and then there's a couple of lines, check yes, no, and then there's a space to where you could write your thoughts in there. And it does, and for all 23 of the planks that are there. Now, in our bylaws, it says that we're going to publish those results on the website, all of them. And so if you choose not to fill out one of our platform pledges, well, we're going to publish that also. And that way, Sheridan County Republicans know who filled out the platform, what their responses were, and who is not really a Republican. By the way, all you have to do is drive to Ranchester, and you can figure that out pretty quick. There's a whole yard that's got all the redcoat signs in it. They're all lined up.
Just go down about a block before my house.
This is true.
Yeah.
Ken, if you didn't know this, Ken lives in a very, very exciting neighborhood. There was one day I pulled up to his house, and there were no parking spaces in front of his house. And so I went down the street, and it used to be kind of a low-rent apartment building. They've since cleaned it up.
Thank God they raised the rents.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I'm sitting there in my car, and down the street comes this truck, and it stops dead center of the street, and it bursts into flames. Here comes Ken running out of his...
True story.
True story. He comes running out of his house with a fire extinguisher, and then he puts out the fire. Well, a little bit later, we're sitting on Ken's front porch. He has a very nice front porch where you can watch all of the excitement. And we look over, and here is a pickup. Was it a pickup pulling a Suburban or a Suburban pulling a pickup? Anyway,
one of the two.
One of the two. Well, on the vehicle that was being towed, there was no tire. And there was only half a rim, and here they are dragging it down the street. And I leaned over to Ken. I'm like, Ken, call the city, man. There's a big, giant canyon in the street. They just carved this big, long crevasse in the middle of the street.
Yeah, we use that now as a speed bump, and that intersection is notorious for near misses.
It's fun, man.
We were out there just 2 days ago, and there's a woman pushing a baby carriage, literally.
Yeah. Okay.
Out onto Burkett, and somebody comes from Linden and just missed her, and she's just standing there in the middle of the street shaking. So it's an
pretty
exciting
fun
place.
It is exciting. Well, anyway, what is even more exciting, perhaps, if you're politically minded like I am, is the how do I want to put this? The variety of opinions on his street. So several houses around Ken's, you can see it's pretty conservative people. And then you go down about 3/4 of a block, turn left, and there's the pregnancy center with a big giant pride flag outside.
Yeah.
Now the block over, so you go 1 block north, and then it's just, you'll see a line of pride stuff during the election. And there's a neighborhood that's got a lot of teachers living in there. You'll see a lot of WEA stuff. So pretty diverse place. Well, the reason why we have a platform is the vast majority of people that live in Ken's neighborhood are registered Republicans. Most of them are. But if you drive around the neighborhood, you'll see all sorts of different signs. Signs for people who are running as a Republican, but they're clearly not. And then the pride flags and the WEA flags. So the reason why we have a platform and we send out platform pledges is to figure out which candidate is where. And so that voters can know, well, if this person may say they're a Republican, but here is what that means to them. And it's not really a purity test, so to speak. It's a way to figure out where people are. And if the voters want to accept that somebody rejects platform one and that one's life, then you know who you're dealing with. That's the whole point.
And I think it needs to be emphasized that this is a private entity.
It is.
We get together and we decide who we want to run to represent our position and our perspective, our worldview. And so when they infiltrate with lies, it's time to call them out.
It is. And voters deserve that because we live in a state where it's really hard to get elected if you're not a Republican, and so most people register that way. People are by nature around here very take people at their word.
You come and you tell me you're a Republican, I'm going to take your word.
Yeah.
And then because we're all busy, we have our jobs, we have our lives, we're running businesses or whatever, trying to run a ranch, don't really have time to go follow you around with a clipboard and watch every move that you make. So when somebody starts doing that, well, then they are obnoxious. They are, the list goes on.
So now, one way that these platform pledges or surveys have been used by various counties is to determine who gets money from the party for their campaign. And in one example, in the southwest corner of the state, that local party has you fill out your platform pledge, and if you end up being 80% on there, well, then you get a small donation from the party. But it also means that you're held accountable to that. So in one instance, and I don't want to mention any names, Andrew Byron, he filled out a platform pledge claiming that he supports 80% of the platform, and then and they wrote him a check. I believe it was the Republican women, but anyway, they wrote him a check, and it wasn't that big. It was $100 or a couple $100, and a week later, he's at a town hall, and he says to them, well, I'm just not really going to support the platform, which precipitated a sharply worded letter from that party's chairman and said, give us our money back if you're going to lie to us. And so in that situation, you had a candidate that bald-faced lied to get a campaign donation. So, I mean, there are legitimate purposes behind this, and I think that it's a private organization and we can just do whatever the heck we want anyway.
I and several people in this room probably regularly give to the Republican Party, and I anticipate that when they give that money to a candidate, that it's going to support the values and the platform. And when somebody comes in and lies about it to receive that, or insists that they are Republican, so they have to be supported by the party as well, I'm effectively my money is being spent to go against my wishes.
It's fraud.
Yeah,
I mean,
it really is.
If you are a candidate and you tell voters, I'm a Republican, and then you have every intention of voting in lockstep with the Democrats, that's a version of fraud. And that's one of the reasons why why the platform exists, so that we can figure out who's a Republican. And secondarily, just philosophically speaking, why would you be a member of an organization that you don't agree with the reasons why they exist? I mean, why would you join an organization that you disagree with everything that they represent?
Because you want to be the spoiler. You want to try to destroy what is there.
Exactly.
That's the only reason.
And in an ideal world, you would go join the Democrat Party because you probably, I mean, if you don't align with the Republican Party, more than likely you align with the Democrats. So the Cowboy is very concerned that these are purity tests. But there's a piece that I just published yesterday on the Open Range Record, and it's an op-ed by the Sheridan County State Committeeman Todd Windsor. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about Todd. He has been involved in the county and state party for a very long time.
I think he worked on Goldwater's campaign.
He probably did. I mean, he was probably the guy that figured out the famous phrase, extremism in defense of liberty is no vice.
Yeah, he might have written that.
But anyway, his op-ed is entitled The Purity Test That Isn't. And let me just, again, I'll read you the opening paragraphs of this one. There has been a lot of disinformation and confusion regarding the bylaws of the Wyoming Republican Party that were adopted at the 2026 state convention. As one of the co-chairs of the bylaws committee and the chair of the Sheridan County Bylaws Committee, I'd like to clarify what occurred. First of all, each county elects a bylaws committee that meets before each county convention. That means there are 23 groups across the state that review and modify the bylaws. The changes each of these committees suggest are presented to the delegates at their conventions for approval. Some of the conventions have over 100 Republican delegates, varying in number by county population. When it comes to the state convention, our recommendations then have to be approved by the delegates to the convention. And so what Todd Windsor is explaining here is that any change that happens either to the platform or to the bylaws is done at the grassroots level. In other words, it comes from your local party, and then it filters up instead of trickle down. This is trickle up to the state party, and it's debated all along. So this isn't the state Republican Party saying you will do this. This all happens at the grassroots level. Now, as to the purity test, Windsor says, quote, "The 2026 bylaws have been accused of allowing the party to have a purity test to determine who is a Republican and to kick people out of the party. Those who don't meet that test, that is. You may look carefully, but you will not find that in the bylaws. What you will find is a line item that has been present for 8 years, which says that the party will not support candidates who do not agree with 80% of the platform. In other words, we will not support candidates financially in the general election or the primary election now who don't meet 80% of the platform." That's it, right? It doesn't say you're kicked out of the party. There's nothing in there that says you're not a Republican. It says we're not going to support you financially.
You might get a censure.
You might get a censure. So if your name, and I don't want to mention any names or pick on anybody, but if your name is Joanne True and you set up a political action committee and raised money for the Democrats, we should be able to figure out whether or not you're actually a Republican. And again, I wouldn't want to cast aspersions in any direction like Joanne True's, but she's not really a Republican. She raised money and donated to Democrats. That's what got her a censure from the state Republican Party. And so all of these things have a purpose. And as a voter, you should be able to know who's trying to defraud you and who's not. That's the whole point. Nobody's saying you're going to get kicked out of the party. It's just saying, man, if you're not really a Republican, we're not going to take the hard-earned dollars that county Republicans donate to the party and give them to you because you're a fraud. That's what that means. And the Republican Party is a private organization, and there's no reason why we should be forced to give our money to people who don't represent our values. It's plain. It's as plain and simple as that. Now, on Sandbags Newsom's post on Facebook, she reposted this long diatribe by this person named Kelly Jensen. I have no idea who Kelly Jensen is, but the only reason I bring it up is she clearly illustrates what I'm talking about. So let's see here. Lifelong Republicans across Park County, quoting now, We're told today that they must now prove their allegiance in order to have a chance, no guarantee, for a local party seal of approval, aka a possible endorsement. The form itself is either 23 or 24 points. The numbers are screwed up, so pick what you prefer. By the way, this is a common problem with the Park County Republicans. They really need a copy editor. And guys and gals in Park County, I know somebody that excellent copy editor, and she's pretty reasonable. If you want, I'll give you her name.
Financially reasonable.
Yeah. I mean, not reasonable when it comes to grammar.
Yes.
Yes. Kind of
quite
a grammar,
rigid.
Kind of a grammar Nazi, which is why I pay her. Anyway, at the top of the form, candidates are told they should strongly support at least 10 items, though it's not an actual option for the 23 or 24 in the cover letter. At least 80% is required by the Wyoming and Park County to even run as a candidate. False, 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 false. No party gets to decide who can run as a candidate. State law determines that. Well, and then it goes on, and there's a brief discussion of, let's see if it's in this, if I got it printed off. What I'm looking for... Yeah, I don't see it in this piece. So one common argument with the party platform is the first plank, that we believe in life from conception to natural death. And a lot of these redcoats say, wow, what about the death penalty? Okay, so that one at first blush seems to be a little bit prickly, a little bit hard to decipher, but it's really not.
You inject those chemicals into your body, it's natural that you die.
Yeah, well, yeah, there you go. And we're a nation of laws, and we believe that if you commit premeditated first-degree murder, at least in the state of Wyoming, you're going to get a needle. I really wish it was a firing squad, or I was a fan of the electric chair. But, that's the way our country works. That is your death.
I think we should point out, there are those that like to try to throw this over. It's not very Christian to kill somebody. It was God himself that said, whoso sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed.
Yes.
He established the principle. So there you go.
Yeah. So anyway, but you can read Todd Windsor's piece on the Open Range Record. I think he did a great job going through all that. And the whole point of this is there are a lot of people that are members of the Republican Party only for partisan reasons. Only because it is very difficult to get elected as a Democrat in most Wyoming counties. Though it's not impossible. I mean, if you're a good candidate and you're a Democrat, make the argument, convince people. Yeah, you don't have to lie and claim to be a Republican, which that's what happens a lot.
Historically, Wyoming has had a lot of Democrats, and in fact, I would argue if you go back even 60 or 70 years, it was predominantly Democrat.
I would argue that from 1975 until 2011, we had a string of Democrat governors. However, Jim Geringer is in there, but I include him because he's not really a Republican anyway. He pretty much governed like a Democrat. Boy, I got some pushback when I said that one. The Representative Governor Geringer had a couple comments on that.
Yeah.
You know why we call him governor? Because every time he gets up to give a speech on the House floor, it's like a campaign speech.
Well, you got to have aspirations for something.
Well, I suppose so. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be joined by Exie Brown. Actually, he's been sitting here the whole time. We're just going to unmute his mic when we come back. So, quick break. Exie Brown's next. Are you sick to death of being told what to think? Maybe you don't even realize that it's happening. Freedom Caucus bad, big spending, big government, liberal, Republican good. Conservatives are bad and they want to starve little children. I have heard it all, my friends. We are way past the time when the news was just the news, if it ever was. But wouldn't it be nice if you had a news platform that was at least honest about what they were telling you? News on the news page, opinion on the opinion page. That's exactly what the Open Range Record is. Go to the website, openrangerecord.com. News, analysis, opinion, and investigative journalism. One more time, that website is openrangerecord.com. You can listen and watch Cowboy State Politics live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble every Tuesday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pay attention to all that other block-headed, Borg-like so-called news if you want. But if you want to get the real story, watch Cowboy State Politics live. And now, back to the program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. It's Open Line Friday. If you want to be part of the show, give me a call, 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. Phone lines are open. On Friday, we leave them going all program long, much to my producer's chagrin. Joining me now on the program is Exie Brown. Exie is from he lives in Cheyenne, and this is his second run at the House of Representatives. Exie, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, David.
Yeah. Well, first time on, well, no, not true. Second time on the show.
Yes.
But it's been a couple of years. Why don't you take a couple of minutes and refresh my viewers' memory about you?
Okay, yeah. My name's Exie Brown. I'm running for the House District 9 seat in Cheyenne. I'm a retired Air Force Chief Master Sergeant, served 22 years between the active duty Air Force and then again on active duty with the Wyoming Air Guard for the remainder of my career. Served as started off my career as security forces, law enforcement security, moved into administration for a short period of time and then was the airfield manager at the Wyoming Air National Guard and then finished off my career in logistics. During my time, I served on the Airfield Management Advisory Council for the entire National Guard. It was one of 10 people that was selected for that. We wrote policy, national policy and stuff for airfield management. I also provided guidance and training and conducted staff assistance visits to help with inspections for 12 different airfields. Ran budgets for both operations and logistics. I'm married, been coming up on now 27 years.
Wow.
Got 3 adult children, all one a UW graduate and 2 from LCCC, and actually got my oldest one is back at UW going through nursing school. Youngest one's back at LCCC going through the dental hygiene program, and then my son's a diesel mechanic. So, big thing with me is, I'm a very principled conservative, which, we're just talking about the platform, I am 100% agree with the Wyoming Republican Party platform. I believe in life does begin at conception, ends at natural death, and we can go into the nuances of where their arguments to try and convolute that issue when they start talking death penalty or somebody breaking into somebody's house and you take their life. They try and convolute that issue very much. Strong Second Amendment person. I was endorsed by GOA 2 years ago.
GOA.
Yep. GOA. Yep. And then, I believe in private property rights. Huge believer in limited government. Government needs to stay out of our lives as much as possible. So that's kind of who I am. And
okay, well, and you left that one little bit. You're a bit of a musician too.
Yes. Yep. I manage, operate, and perform in the band Southern Fried. If you look it up, it's spelled F-R-Y-E-D. Been doing that been part of my life for about 18 years. We're actually in our final year. Yep, we're on our final tour.
Okay, so I got to ask you. So is this like the KISS final tour where that you have a farewell tour, and then you get bored a couple years later. You have
the,
another
the
farewell
Eagles.
tour. The Eagles, another good example.
No. After this one, it's done. I mean, I'll still, I'll still get invited to like some singer-songwriter festivals and stuff that I'll probably jump in on. But no, as far as the whole touring and traveling and stuff, yeah, it's time to wrap it up. I'm not getting any younger, and the travel does tend to wear on you. So yeah, we're doing our final one. Matter of fact, we are going to be back in this area next Saturday.
Cool.
We're going to be headlining the Outlaw Music Fest down in Casey.
Right on. That's going to be a big party.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Did you ever go to Crystal Dew Days?
Never had a chance to go up there. No.
That was usually a pretty wild time.
All right.
I'm sure. I don't know if Ned Ledoux is going to be there this year, but he almost always headlined it.
No, he's not going to be there. We're actually the headliner on Saturday, and then I think they got some performances on Sunday. So
yeah, that's by the way, just a shameless plug for them. If you want a good time in a small town music festival, that's the place to go. They usually have a little rodeo going on, and it's a fun time. Yeah. So main question here, you sound like a busy guy. You're a business owner and paint houses.
Yep.
Musician. Why would you want to run for the House of Representatives?
Well, I got a group of friends of mine that we've always sat around and talked about politics, and we pay attention to the issues and things that were going on. And one of the things we always talked about is like, gosh, people need to get involved and stuff. And 2 years ago, I started getting a lot of phone calls. It was actually the last week before filing, and I'm on vacation, and my phone just started blowing up, and talking about our current House rep right now, and
we don't want to mention any names.
Yeah.
Landon Brown, who, by the way, it's been, not to interrupt you, but it's been something like 2,160 days since he agreed to an interview on this show and didn't show up. Sorry, continue.
Not surprised either. So
no,
but one thing we always talked about is getting involved, and when they started encouraging me to run, I was like, I had to take some time to think about it. We got back from vacation the day before filing ended, and I made the decision. It was actually the next morning because I was still thinking about it overnight, and I made it the next morning. It's like, yeah, it's time for me to get off the sideline, get involved. Somebody needs to run and actually provide true representation and leadership in this district. So I went and filed, and I've been heavily involved. Obviously not just running for office, but I've been involved with the Laramie County GOP. I've been trying to be involved more with the state GOP and really trying to make a difference, something better for our citizens.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's really the reason why I started this program. I was I still irritate my parents with politics, but irritating everybody else and complaining about what's going on, and mainly that the media is in general a bunch of liars. I mean, we just talked about an article where they have no idea what they're talking about, and I just decided, hey, it's time, enough complaining. It's time to do something, and so I started this program. So, all right, one question, and this is kind of my pet question, but I think it's important. You used the word conservative. Mm-hmm. What does that word mean?
Well, it means that somebody who's principled, again, with the and believes in the Wyoming Republican Party platform. You believe that life begins at conception, ends at natural death. You're a staunch, supporter of the Second Amendment. Second Amendment means, it says in the Constitution, shall not be infringed. And you firmly believe that. Protecting private property rights, American exceptionalism. Those are the things, in that entire platform that really are the principled ideas of the Republican Party and what it means to be a conservative. And I agree with you, 80% is kind of the bar, but I think bar. you should be supporting the entire thing, in my opinion. But it's also about being principled, and not wavering on where you stand. I always, our current House rep, he always loved to say that, compromise is a 4-letter word. People don't like to compromise. I can compromise policy, but the second it's going to compromise principle, I'm out. And that's where people need to understand that principles matter. You have to be principled, and that's part of being a conservative is being principled and believing in the conservative values that you stand for.
Okay, so let me ask you about one of those.
Yeah.
You a couple of times you've mentioned the first plank of the platform, which is we believe in life. But we've tried several times to get abortion bans through the legislature, and unfortunately, one of the things that many Wyoming conservatives have realized that if you want it to go through the legislature, it's got to have exceptions on it. So, in my mind, there should be no exceptions. So, is that going against your principles to vote for a bill like that?
Yeah, I do not agree with any exceptions whatsoever, because life is so precious, and there is never ever a reason or a good excuse to end a child's life, or an unborn child's life especially. They are, we have to defend the defenseless. And so I don't agree. I think Barlow tried to explain his way around that at the Family Alliance candidate forum the other night. And he was trying to say, well, to get things through, you got to kind of concede here and concede here. It's like, no, the firm principle is you don't end life. So I don't agree with voting on something that is going to allow those exceptions in there. We need to really work towards getting the exceptions out and protecting life from the beginning.
So if I understand what you're saying correctly, when that bill comes up again, which it inevitably will, it's one of the things that I think Wyoming does a really good job of. I mean,
Right.
our courts are another matter, but the legislature, I think there's a lot of people in there that believe in that we probably shouldn't kill babies. The question was, though, that if those exceptions are in the bill, and the only way that bill is going through there is if they're on it, do you vote for it or are you voting against it?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Toughy, huh?
Yeah, because, I mean, we got to at least start getting, inching towards that, getting rid of abortion. So that's going to be a tough one to get part of it through, or at least get some of it through. Probably at least start there, but I would throw some amendments in there. I'd throw some amendments in there to get those exceptions out of there, and try to at least get the amendments pushed through to pull that out. But that's going to be a tough one.
Ken?
So I kind of like to use a football analogy there. I mean, the goal is a touchdown.
Right.
No matter where you're at, the goal is a touchdown. You may try several different maneuvers. If you're a running back, for example, if you're blocking, you're going to throw some good blocks. You're going to do everything you can do, but you're not going to make a touchdown on every
That's
run.
true.
And sometimes you got to take the yardage you can get and come back and hit it again. And Chuck Gray is fond of saying, I was the first one to bring pro-life bills, and he did that, and we have been pounding it and pounding it and pounding it, and now we got to fight the judicial branch to try to get through, because they don't seem to understand their role in this. They think they still get to write laws.
Well, and that's exactly what they've done.
Right.
I was reading Fred Harrison's most recent column this morning, and he makes the point that the Supreme Court just ignored subsection C out of Article 1, Section 38. That's the Healthcare Freedom
Right.
Amendment. And Section C says the legislature can determine reasonable restrictions to this right. And but we have an activist judiciary, and until we make some major changes, we can't really do too much with that. So let me ask you another question about the platform. So I don't think that they're necessarily all that vague. I think you can look at any policy bill that comes through, and you can find at least one of those planks that it relates to in one way or another. So can you give me some specific things that you would like to get accomplished in furtherance of the Republican Party platform? Just some specific bills.
Well, let's see. Gosh, that's good. That's a really good question. I think property taxes is a big thing. What I want to get pushed through is we eliminate residential property tax. And I think that's a very important thing to mention, is that it's residential. We talk about keeping taxes low, taxing people at the least amount. Property tax residential specifically, in my opinion, you should not be paying unrealized capital gains and pay the government rent to live in your home for the rest of your life. And we in Wyoming have the means to do that. Last year, I believe our investments and interest earnings collected over $1.86 billion, which is 3 times the amount of property tax that was collected in the state of Wyoming. And we have that ability to eliminate property tax. It's been a huge thing when I talk to residents in my district that they're worried, especially those on fixed incomes. I had a gal on the front porch. She was almost in tears. She said she's on a fixed income. The rise in gas prices, the rise in fuel costs. She said, I don't know how I'm going to be able to pay my property tax. I've lived here 30 years. I've paid off my home, and I don't want to leave. So that is something I think we really need to focus on and really need to eliminate. There has been another a thought out there about, we've heard about, acquisition value. There's another step that can be taken where you take 90% of your annual surplus, give it back in property tax relief, and then the 10% you put in an interest-bearing account, and within an 8 to 10 year period, you can eliminate property tax that way. But I believe here in Wyoming, we have the ability to do that. So one of the things I want to push through is get a bill through that will put the elimination of residential property tax on the ballot, make that constitutional change, and push forward so people don't have to continue paying in perpetuity even after they pay off their home.
Yeah, I think that's just wrong. And the truth is, residential property taxes only account for a pretty small percentage of county revenue. I think when I looked at the ballot initiative, that really a 50% reduction in the amount of residential property taxes only results in at most 15% reduction in county revenues. So I think you and I have spent enough time in the gallery that I think I could probably assume you think we spend too much. You and I have had lots of conversations about that. So that being said, where would you, and please be specific here, where would you make reductions in state spending?
Well, I think we need to look at, Wyoming Business Council was one of them. I know that that was a heavy topic, and of course the University of Wyoming. And those are some specific areas, and when I was asked about this before, what I thought about the University of Wyoming, and somebody called it a cut. I was like, no, it was a 4% reduction. And what you look at, when you look at the budget, Wyoming they were given a 4% reduction. The Wyoming Business Council is going to be cut out completely, but that got restored. But when you look at the budget itself, the way the budget's set up, when you give a budget request, you have your base budget. That is the money you need to operate your agency. And I think this last year it was a little over $9.5 billion on the baseline. And then you go to these exception requests. These are what I call your nice to haves, your wants. This is additional money they want to have a program, funded or to do some other nice little projects. And that's where you start looking at where we could start making the cuts. Look at the exception requests and specifically going down through there. And the budget didn't get cut. People are saying, oh, the budget got burnt down and slashed. Well, at the end of the day, the overall request from the governor was $11.1 billion. And I think it got reduced. The growth was slowed by not even $200 million, I believe it was. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm not going to throw the numbers out. I had another question.
You're close. I mean,
and that's what we need to start looking at those areas, the nice to haves and the wants. If when I did budgets in the military, you had your must pays, which is the bills and everything you had to pay for. You had your mission critical items that you needed to get. Then you looked at what can make your mission more efficient and more effective.
What
Those
would be
are
nice.
things. Yeah. And then you had What are the nice to haves?
Yeah.
What are the wants? And if you didn't have the money in your budget, you cut those out.
So I'll give you a little dose of reality. Okay. If you want to make any dent in Wyoming's budget, there are two facets that you're going to have to look at. One is healthcare,
Yep.
and healthcare is tied to federal funding, so any reductions we make generally would cause a reduction in federal funding. And then another one is education. And you start to cut education, you hear the screaming, and
the
then you
knives
also
come
see
out.
the
Oh, yeah.
judiciary stand in and sued the legislature, saying, $20,000 per student isn't enough, even though that's more than almost any state spends. You've got to spend more. So if you look at education and you look at healthcare, where do you start to pare those back?
Well, I think in education, you need to start paring back, administration. Administration costs are huge. I actually had this conversation a couple days ago, and administration has grown. You look at the last 20 years, there was a diagram that came out. Administration's grown 95%. And when this graph came out 2 years ago, it was 8 to 10% growth in students and teachers. And actually now students, the growth is actually going down. So we need to start looking at where we can reduce as far as administration. Now, I think what helped was during recalibration, which was passed for the first time in 15 years, siloing that money and putting more money into the classroom is going to help, because that's more money that the administration can't tap into.
No, I think that was a great
So,
move. I mean, I
it
think
was.
we had to, and it blows my mind that the argument that's being made is, well, what the legislature did is going to cause us to have to cut athletics. Now, wait a minute. Hold on a minute. If by siloing the money that was meant for the classroom is going to cut athletics, that means you were spending money meant for teachers and books and desks and those things in the classroom. You were taking that money and spending it on activities. And so really all this time you've been stealing from teachers. And I'm not shocked that the education lobby is making that argument, but I am kind of surprised that they have.
I look at that and I say, okay, so it's administratively heavy. You got a couple places you can cut, and what's their choice? We're not going to cut ourselves. We're going to not allow the kids to participate as freely. They can still participate, but we're not going to be sending teams to Alaska anymore.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so the ones that get me are, we have an agronomy club. At least in Buffalo, they had an agronomy club. And what that was is you would travel to the University of Wyoming, to Laramie, which, by the way, from Buffalo to Laramie is about a 5.5 hour drive. So that's, of course, they get reimbursed the transportation, but that's hotels, that's meals for the agronomy club. Or the traveling poetry club. That one always surprised me. All right, Exie, I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ken. Did you have...
No.
Okay. One more question. In my opinion, the biggest problem we have, and it's not just in Wyoming, it's in the entire country, is voter apathy. In Wyoming, only half of the people that are eligible to register to vote are actually registered. And in any given election, only half of those actually show up and vote. And in a midterm election, the numbers are actually a little bit lower. So voter apathy being one of our biggest problems, if you're elected, what are you going to do to decrease the amount of apathy? That is, what are you going to do for your constituents to increase their turnout?
Well, the biggest thing I think is communication. Communicating with them, being transparent on what is going on, and this is why I go door to door. I'm not going to be sitting at home and just shooting out mailers, during this election. I want people to get out there, get excited to vote, and I think communication is a big thing. I will tell you that most people do not even hear from their representatives. Nothing. I've been to several doors on the campaign trail that have said, I've lived in this house for 30 years or 40 years. You're the first candidate to ever come to my door.
Wow.
So it's about engagement. You got to be engaged with the public. You got to be engaged with your constituents. Getting the message out there of, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I am doing for the people in our district, and remind them that it's important to get out and vote, because if you don't vote, then you're not exercising your civic duty. You're not having your voice be heard, and that's why I tell people when I go out and about too, is they're like, oh yeah, sometimes I vote, sometimes I don't. My vote don't matter. I actually told somebody at the door last week that said, well, my vote really doesn't matter. I said, my race was 17 vote difference between, my opponent and myself. And they're like, oh my gosh, are you serious? I said, yeah. I said, had you come out and voted, that might have, and would have voted for me, that would have changed, it would have been, I still would have probably lost, but, that would have been one more vote in my direction. And I said, when you get down to these small numbers, like mine was 17, I think Ben Hornock's was 24, those individual votes matter. And I tell them, especially locally, if you were wanting your local candidate to win, your vote matters. So I think it's a lot about being able to engage with the public on what's going on, what you're doing, and why it's important for them to get out and vote.
My precinct seat, I won it by one vote. I've heard the same thing. A lot of people say, well, my vote doesn't matter. Well, in Wyoming, in a lot of places, in a lot of elections, it did. Ken, you had a
couple of years ago, 38 votes.
Yeah. There was Alan Slagle. He won his by 3 votes. So I think voter engagement is a big part of this. But let me ask you a follow-up question. And if you're successful, you're going to experience this, that you sit in a committee, and most of the time, the only people you hear from are lobbyists and other government agencies.
Right.
That's it. And there might be a couple of people from the general public that show up there. So when you're in the legislature and you're sitting in those committees and nobody's showing up, what are you going to do to get your folks to come in and weigh in on whatever topic you're discussing?
Well, especially if it's an important issue in the district from people, get the word out to them. If I collect a bunch of if I can collect the email addresses and shoot out and say, hey, this is what we're going to be discussing on this committee. Please, if you feel very passionate about this, please come out and speak either for or against, however, because the more public engagement we have, the better informed you can be instead of listening to these lobbyists all day. I mean, when I go sit in on city councils and stuff like that, you got your typical, city, your unelected bureaucrats, you got, union bosses that come out and speak and things like that. But then, the public, really gives their opinion on and their beliefs and feelings on a particular subject. And that really, I think, helps them, helps get that engagement involved and let you see a different point of view. So I think, again, it goes back to engagement. Let him know what's going on. This is an issue being brought up in, say, whatever committee I get selected to. If you feel passionate about that, I encourage you to come out, spend an hour, 2 hours, come out and testify on it. But it all comes back to engagement.
All right. So we've got about a minute left before we're going to take a break. If my viewers want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
So you can get a hold of me at exiebrown.com or Exie at exieforhouse.com, or you can call me at 307-640-7901. Pretty easy to reach, and we'll get back, and I will be able to get back to you usually within about a 24-hour period.
All right, Exie.
So,
well, I appreciate it. And,
no, thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks for making the trip up here. It's,
yeah.
It gives you a little break from Cheyenne.
Oh, it does.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by candidate for the United States House of Representatives, Mr. Steve Freeze, here live in the studio. Back in a minute. know that you think it's spring and that the weather is just going to continue to warm up and you don't have to worry about snow or ice or 30-degree temperatures anymore. In case you've forgotten, this is Wyoming, my friend, and that sort of thinking doesn't work here. 1 minute, it could be 75 and sunny, and 10 minutes later, snow. Whatever the weather, you need a pair of socks that'll keep your feet cool and dry even on the hottest of summer days. And if you happen to run into that spring snowstorm, you'll stay nice and toasty warm. Well, your feet anyway. To get you a pair, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. These are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election.
Siberia,
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell. Iceland.
France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the last year and a half been more than you could bear? Well, if it has, you've come to the right place. Call my friend Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only getting stronger. This program is expanding faster than really anybody ever thought it would. Make sure you don't miss a minute of Cowboy State Politics Live. We broadcast every Tuesday through Friday from 8 a.m. until 10. And, of course, the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can find that anywhere that you get your podcast. Just Google it. You'll find me. And also the Open Range Record, my written news platform. It's a tremendous amount of success there. So anyway, don't miss any of those. Also, it's Open Line Friday, and so if you want to be part of the show, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. Well, I'm joined now by a candidate for U.S. House of Representatives, Mr. Steve Freeze. Steve, welcome to the show.
Good morning, David. It is such a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm glad you could make the trip. It was awesome that you could join us in the studio. It's so much better than doing stuff, remotely.
I would agree.
All right. So first question, I'll give you the treatment that everybody gets on my show. I know next to nothing about you. I know your mom pretty well. Very nice lady. I've spent a couple times speaking to her group. I know
she's turning 86 in a couple weeks. She's going strong.
Oh man, she's got a great group in Jackson.
The AW group, Active Women Engaging.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You go visit with those ladies. I really enjoy it every time I get to go there. But beyond that, I know that you got really good hair. My wife's a hairstylist, so I notice things like that. Other than that, I don't know a heck of a lot. So tell me about yourself. Who is Steve Freeze?
Sure. Well, there is a misconception around because, our Freeze Associates was a very successful investment business that my dad founded, but that didn't really take off until I was becoming a young adult. I grew up, not with a silver spoon in my mouth, but more of a Kentucky Fried Chicken spork, I'd say.
All right.
I was cutting lawns, painting houses, waiting tables, and I sold Cutco knives. So, I know the value of a day's hard work. After university, I joined my dad's business, and we built that into something really successful. But we sold it in the early 2000s and started putting all our energy really into building the conservative movement. Excuse me. So we helped raise the first $1 million for Tea Party Patriots.
Mm-hmm.
We met Charlie Kirk when he was 18 years old. When we learned that there were empty lots with 18 registered voters in Texas, we funded a group called True the Vote, which long before the 2020 issues arrived. And then other groups you might know, I'm sure you know well, James O'Keefe with his hidden camera work that's done phenomenal work. And then also, I was so concerned about the trans nonsense that when I heard the story of Riley Gaines, I chipped in right away to help her get platforming from Independent Women's Forum. There were a lot of stories like that one, but this one rose to the top because, she had media training and there were people calling Fox News every day saying, you got to carry this story. And it broke through, and now it's pretty much a household name at this point.
Okay, so one question I get a lot about you is that nobody's really seen you involved in like state Republican politics. So tell me your experience in what you've done in politics in Wyoming.
Sure. Well, it started with our fight with Teton County.
Everybody has a fight with Teton County.
My wife and I founded a classical Christian school, and they wanted to apply the zoning rules of a house. And the restrictive zoning in Teton County is one of the things that makes it a beautiful place. We don't have giant flashing neon signs and billboards everywhere. It's cool aspects to that. But they passed a law back in the 80s, or I should say an LDR, a land development regulation, that homes couldn't be bigger than 10,000 square feet. So, they said there were just enormous hurdles in our way all the way along. It would be too long to go in. But, for example, they wanted us to only build buildings that were 10,000 square feet. Well, you can put a gym in that, but the locker room would have to be 30 feet away.
Yeah,
so
and outside.
They'd have to run through the snow and get changed. So in really kind of a moment of desperation, I got the idea that, maybe there's more common sense in Cheyenne, and people would see that the zoning for public and private schools should pretty much be the same. And so now all across the state, should zoning get out of hand anywhere else, private schools will have this opportunity to play by the same rules, which, made sense to the legislation, to legislators. That was my first experience with the state. I'm told it's really something to come up with a bill and get it through in the first session.
Usually, that guy right there.
Yeah, usually it takes a while. And then I also played a supporting role with the Steamboat Scholarship, the ESA. I've been active in the school choice movement for quite a long time nationally.
Okay. Just one quick question as it relates to the ESA bill. One of my big disagreements with it is an amendment that was added late that we'll just say that it guarantees universal pre-K. I mean, there's some nuances to it, but that amendment was added to it. Talk to me about that. Did that in your mind make it better, worse? Do you think that it is a problem?
I'm not a big supporter of universal pre-K, but this is part of the sausage making of getting legislation passed. I'm a fan for kids being in the home with their moms. One of the central pillars of what I'm running for is for greater jobs so that there are better opportunities and we can, moms can stay at home. That's my favorite version of a childhood, especially in those early years. So I wasn't a fan of that addition either.
Yeah, that one. I was sitting in the gallery when that happened, and actually, I was supportive of it up until that point, and then the Albert Sommers Amendment showed up, and because the reason I call it that is that was his bill, and I was like, man, this is going to kill this thing, and it didn't, and so I guess I kind of agree that in some cases that's sort of the sausage making, but sometimes amendments get added and it really kind of dooms the thing. All right, so you're running for the House of Representatives.
Yes.
Why?
Well, I've had the privilege of raising my kids with my parents nearby, 3 generations together. And that's a special thing. You know, wisdom gets passed on, family lore, family stories. And far too many families in Wyoming see their young folks move away for opportunities. I want to fix that. I want to change that. What I think is necessary is that we take advantage of the incredible team that President Trump has put together with Chris Wright at Energy, Lee Zeldin at EPA, and Doug Burgum at Interior, and we really open up Wyoming's energy opportunities. I think by providing the great jobs here that we can, by building those industries, we're going to be able to keep families here. They're not going to have to move away. And to me, it's all about grandparents being together with their grandchildren. That's something that I value. And the track record I have to show that that's something I'll be able to deliver on is that I think one of my biggest accomplishments was putting together a group of a package, really, of executive orders that President Trump used in his first administration. This hadn't really been done before since I think there was something called Mandate for Leadership that Heritage Foundation did when Reagan entered. And the years after that, it was just sort of a white paper that said the president should do this or maybe do that. But what we provided was signature-ready orders that sign it and it will do this. And that was made possible by, a couple years of recruiting sharp conservative attorneys that saw all the inner workings of the government. And one of the key things they provided, you remember President Reagan talked about 2 for 1. He'd repeal 2 regulations for every one. At the end of the day, the tool we gave him actually ended up repealing 7 regulations for every one that he passed. That gave me an insight into the regulatory system. And I know that what we need to do is take to Washington not a complaint, but a solution. So I'm going to be holding roundtables with, the smaller operators and folks in town, folks across the state in both mining and oil and gas and coal, and we're going to be looking for what's the low-hanging fruit. What are the first changes of regulations that we can make that are going to open things up, and then maybe rethink some of the larger structural things. Maybe there's some structural changes to how BLM works with their permitting. I'm really interested in greater state primacy for decision making, and also something called permit by rule. Not to get too technical, but it's check these boxes, you get a permit, not just a run around, do another study, wait for this bureaucratic process, but let's get things moving. I think that with the team that's in Washington now, Wyoming's got a rare window to really provide a lot of great jobs so that families can stay here and be multi-generational families growing and living in Wyoming.
Okay, now I want to ask you about those executive orders, but I have one question first. What is the proper role of government?
The proper role of government, I wish I could quote I know that constitutional view, but it's the defense of citizens and defend our liberties. I'd say broadly speaking, it wasn't set up to provide a lot of free stuff. That wasn't the purpose of the government.
Okay, so then my question on your executive orders is, one of the problems with those is you have a perpetual turnover. So you get an administration, they write a whole bunch of executive orders, Joe Biden, for example, and then you have President Trump comes in and he writes a whole bunch of executive orders and overturns some of those and issues some of his. But nowhere in the Constitution do you see the term executive order. So my question for you is, should we really be governing by executive order, or should those be done through legislation in Congress?
Absolutely. Well, the proper use of an executive order is for the president to tell his agencies how to carry out their role in enforcing the laws that the legislature has written. There's a proper role for them. But Obama, of course, was the first one to sign something that for months he said he couldn't, right? The DACA order. Yeah. I can't sign it. Then he went ahead and did it. Oh, looky here.
Now I signed it.
Went ahead and did it. So, yes, you're absolutely right. And it's interesting that you're hearing the phrase now, a lot of people saying we need to codify these orders into law. I have to tell you, back in 2010, when I first pulled these teams together, We were talking specifically about Mexico City policy, which is the use of our overseas aid dollars, that when Mexico City policy is in place, it restricts those dollars from being used for abortion. And then the Democrats repeal that, and it's abortions around the world on your tax dollars every time a Democrat's in the White House. So what we did was we redefined it to cover a bigger pyramid, a bigger piece of the funding. But in those meetings, I said, why can't we just turn an executive order into a law? And it was interesting. Washington
passed the law in the first place.
Well, but once you've got it in the executive order to transfer that into law, but there hadn't really been any precedent on that until a few years later. So now you hear people talking about codifying the executive orders, but I was in the room when that was battled over. So I've been thinking about this for a long time. It would be much better if we had a functioning legislature. I don't think we've passed an actual. It's supposed to be a series of 12 funding bills since 1997.
Been a long time.
It's all been stopgap funding measures, continuing resolutions, and Congress just really isn't doing its job. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're not facing the Democratic Party that we did even under Bill Clinton, a Bill Clinton Democrat, who I think I meet some Bill Clinton Democrats around the state, but an AOC and Ilhan Omar Democrat is an entirely different animal, and it's very difficult to find common ground with these people. I think what we have to do is win a lot more elections. We've got to hold the House so that President Trump's agenda is not brought to a screeching halt.
Okay, the number one polling item right now is the Save America Act.
Yes.
If it doesn't matter which poll you look at, that is number one across the country. It's probably more than an 80-20 issue. But we can't seem to get that through Congress. So if you're elected, what are you going to do to try to get that thing to the finish line?
So I should say, David, I had never intended to run for office. Kyle True came through and met with me. We were talking about some liberal things we wanted to see if we could work on at the University of Wyoming, some policy things. I was connecting him with some national experts there. And he, oh boy, I've lost my train of thought.
No, it's
can you back me up just a little?
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
It's all right. So I asked you about the Save America Act.
Yes. What I was going to say was that when we funded Tea Party Patriots, Jenny Beth Martin was one of the key folks there. And as I was contemplating whether I would enter this race, I turned on the television. There's Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, standing, and Jenny Beth Martin standing right behind him. So I've seen this continued benefit of the investments that we made in good people to drive good policy. When I saw Jenny Beth Martin standing behind him, I just thought, I've got to get in this battle. It's too important. I've been playing a role all along, but I've been out of the spotlight. President Trump needs people fighting for this. I think the Senate has failed to deliver on this. And we've got to just go back and make it happen again. Absolutely. It's the number one thing. It's so clear. The Democrats did everything they could to flood this country with illegals, give them lots of free stuff, turn them into permanent, give them the right to vote, and they control the country forever. And it's just miraculous that we've got a president that stepped in, closed the border, and is setting this straight. We got to keep going till we get the SAVE Act done.
Okay, next question. Every state has their own version of Minnesota. Every state has fraud, and it appears that depending on where you're at, the fraud shows up differently. Being in Teton County, I would hope that you have an interesting perspective on this one. But Wyoming's version of that fraud is so-called affordable housing. It is happening all across the state. You have East Coast equity firms that own giant pieces of property that pay no property taxes, that dump those properties back to municipalities after they're dilapidated and require millions of dollars worth of upkeep. So it's a real problem. So if you're successful, what are you going to do in Congress to try to root out these different versions of fraud? And if you could, speak to specifically the affordable housing issue, because I think that's a huge one in the state.
Well, It is an issue in Teton County. There are lots of twists and turns to that I don't understand how, our family donated a property that we were told was going to be turned into a multifamily home, and it just sits there right now. I'm not sure this was 15 years ago. I don't know what happened. Did they sell it and use the money for something else? I don't know. It was in a perfect location. I saw plans drawn up. So I'm not as close to all the twists and turns there. But one of the things that I really struggled with when we were building coming up with the first plan for our school, we talked about putting some small apartments or cabins there. And the housing authority told us that, yes, we could build them there, but we couldn't even decide who was going to live in the property, on our school property.
What?
These were supposed to go into a pool that was supposedly randomly. So we were going to have random people living on our school campus because our houses were part of this pool of affordable housing.
Bizarre.
Thank goodness we were able to dodge that one. So, and then it also seems like they build this enormous program that they've got to have more people to administer, which guess what? They need some more subsidized government housing for them. It's like a cancer.
Yep.
It just keeps growing and growing. Obviously, in Teton County and some other places, there are limited, especially in Teton County, there's a limited amount of developable land. But the restrictions that they put on, they make it so expensive for developers to turn a profit by building some of the affordable housing, because they've said that it has to be kind of nice. They can't make affordable housing that would be profitable because somehow that's not nice enough for the people that want to dole out the subsidies. So market forces can solve a lot of these problems. Unfortunately, in Teton County, it does mean people live across the hill or they live down the valley a ways, but that's economics.
Yeah, and Steve, it blows my mind that there's this assumption that people have a right to live where they want, and that's just not true. You don't have a right to live in America's richest county. It's ridiculous. But I think that you hit on probably the biggest problem with all of this is the subsidies. That there are so many ways to get taxpayer dollars that and it gets used in new and inventive ways every single time it's tried. In Wyoming it's the so-called affordable housing. Other places it's the Leering Center. In California it's the assisted living. So how can we, in your opinion, how can we get a handle on all of this pipeline of taxpayer dollars?
With respect to Wyoming, my primary efforts in Washington will be to move more of the decision-making power to the states. But when you look at a place like Minnesota with Tim Walz,
crazy.
You almost wish there was or the violence in South Chicago. President Trump talked about sending in, National Guard troops to solve the problem there. There's a tension. There's a tension between local control. I think we're responsible in this state. I think we make good decisions. But, I know there's going to be some trade-offs. As I work for more local control that'll benefit Wyoming, I understand that's going to mean there's going to have to be a much sharper, much greater attention paid to where dollars are flowing in some of these states where you have, the Somali pirates going crazy with the daycare center fraud and so on. So I'm hoping that the DOGE effort gets kind of doubled down and re-implemented. But I also wanted to share, as I've traveled around, I've learned that, in some cases, the initial DOGE effort here that hit, they kind of cut into muscle with some of the folks that were in the Forest Service and in the BLM. I'm told because it's slowed down the permitting process and made things a little more difficult. So I think that's got to be done with some precision. There might have been some instances of kind of a blunt instrument there.
Okay. All right. So let's take kind of a larger view of things. Wyoming is a small state. We have the luxury of it's really easy to find your state representative or just to have him produce your program. And a lot of us have our representative's phone number. We're used to being able to get a hold of the people that represent us. And so if you're successful, what's your plan to keep in touch with Wyoming citizens?
Well, it's getting back to the state as often as I can. You know, I've flown into D.C. and I was on the plane, and there was Cynthia Lummis and there was John Barrasso, and then when I flew back, we happened to be on the same flight back out. You know, they both make the laps pretty regularly. That's the key thing. It's to stay in touch with people around the state. Kind of, you know, Harriet shows me her.
I won't tell her you said that.
Harriet shows me her schedule, and she really gets around the state on a constant kind of loop, and that's what I intend to do as well.
Okay. All right. Last question, and this one I think is it irritates people like me to no end. But you see, candidates, like every candidate, is a conservative. Doesn't matter if they're really a Democrat or not. So, last question for you: what does it mean to be a conservative?
What it means to be conservative is that you care about the Constitution, you care about freedom, liberty, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, life, and limited government. I think that's the bottom line in a nutshell. And it means at this point that you've got a keen awareness of the threat of the radical left and that you're doing everything you can to push back.
Okay, great. Well, I got just a couple of minutes left. Why don't you give me your 2-minute speech, and if you could, tell my listeners how to get a hold of you.
Oh, great. Well, right up front then, the website is freeze4wy.com, and freeze is spelled like French fries with 2 S's. FRIESSFORWY.com. A lot of great info there, and an email address there too. We'd love to hear from you. I think the real reason that I got into this race is that I want to see multi-generational families stay together here. Well, I like grandparents being with grandchildren, not just for free babysitting, but because it passes on family traditions. And the only way we're going to get there is that if families starting out, I've got great jobs that'll keep them there and they don't have to move away. I'm going to go to Washington. I'm going to get regulations changed to explode in the very best way our oil, gas, coal mining, rare earths, uranium, all of it. We've got to make the most we can of this opportunity with this administration, and then give future certainty for how those things can be sustained that don't get flip-flopped back with the next administration. I want great jobs for families so that they can stay here and enjoy this beautiful state.
All right, Steve. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming in.
Great being with you.
All right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll finish up the show.
Are you watching what's happening in our country and asking, what can I do? Join the John Birch Society in Salt Lake City, June 6th, for a powerful one-day conference. The day includes a host of respected speakers, 2 meals, and meaningful connections. You'll gain clarity on the issues and walk away with practical steps you can take to your community. Reserve your seat today at jbs.org/SLC26. That's jbs.org/SLC26.
One of those speakers at the Salt Lake City event will be yours truly. That's right, my friends. I'm one of the keynote speakers at the JBS 2026 conference. So join me in Salt Lake City if you want to see me. The following ad was paid for by Brent Bean for governor.
You won't find him leading a horse out of a barn or leaning against a corral with the sun setting behind him, because Wyomingites don't need a candidate who creates a good photo op. What you will find is a hard-working, experienced leader who believes Wyoming should always come first. A conservative grounded in strong values and steady principles. Ready to lead Wyoming the right way. Brent Bean for governor.
Today's program is also brought to you by Morton Buildings. If you're in the market for any type of building for your property, you need to call Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They're the best in metal building construction, and they've been doing it longer than anybody else around. So it doesn't matter if it's a garage or a barn or maybe something bigger, like a roping arena or maybe a giant warehouse for your business. The two guys you need to call first are Marcos and Jesse. Again, their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out on their website, mortonbuildings.com. Never happened to me before. Never in the history of Cowboy state politics have I not been successful at chasing a guest out of my studio. It didn't work this time. So just kidding, my friends. So as it turns out, Mr. Freeze has some more time on his hands. So we just asked him to stay over for the break. And we didn't talk about my favorite subject, things that go boom. So as you know, Steve, guns are pretty important in Wyoming. In fact, if you want to get elected in Wyoming, one of the things you shouldn't do is say that you don't like guns. Wyoming has been really successful in passing a lot of what I think are really important gun laws. You know, we had the constitutional carry. There's more firearms in here than you know. Anyway, we've done a really good job. Constitutional carry, stand your ground. We passed a SAPA bill, which I worked a tremendous amount on. But what we don't see, I don't think, is that reflected in Washington, D.C. And it could be just because of the politics of possible, not exactly sure. But if you're elected, what are you going to do about my gun rights?
Forgive me, but reflected in Washington, D.C., isn't that why we spent that money on the pool?
Ken, that's a different reflection.
Yeah, I sometimes get confused, but anyway, sorry to derail you.
All right, so let's talk gun laws. What are you going to do?
Gun laws. You know, there's only one gun law I'd be for, that I'd advocate for, and that would be that pistol and rifle manufacturers need to put threads on so we can have suppressors.
It's mandatory now. All barrels
I'd be
must
for
be
that.
threaded.
I'd be for that. I'd also like to see the process of obtaining a suppressor to be more straightforward and quick. And, you know, all these leftists think that it turns into some sort of spy movie, silent, snipey thing. But if you've been out,
It doesn't.
It's nothing like that at all. If you've been out with a 30-06 that you're just trying to keep, so if you're hunting with a few other guys and you don't want all the elk to be scared away with every first shot, you know, it's really nice if you can limit that sound. And also it protects our ears.
All right,
That's what I'd propose. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm glad you brought that up because, I mean, there's a deeper discussion to be had here in that, you know, when we passed the big, beautiful bill, one of the parts that got stripped out of that, the reconciliation bill, was the elimination of the NFA tax on suppressors. Okay, so they took away the fee, but really the tax stamp is still there. And what I'm getting at is in Washington, D.C., we pass all of these regulations, and it seems that we get right up to the point at which we're going to do something awesome, and then it fails. And it's usually some weird thing. In this case, it was the Senate parliamentarian. So if you're successful in getting to the House, what are you going to do to help get around that? I mean, is there anything you can do, or I mean, have you thought about that at all?
You know, it's going to take building relationships. It's going to take working with others to come up with the solutions that can, as you say, let's get rid of the stamp altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Relative to our gun rights, though, I think there's kind of a bigger issue that we need to be aware of. The EPA has armed SWAT teams.
Oh, yeah.
The IRS has armed SWAT teams.
Ag has a huge stockpile.
And if you remember, President Obama was talking about building a domestic police force. This is a danger. I don't think any of those groups really should have. I think there should be a special team that maybe assists each of those groups when they need that kind of help. We don't need to have a government that has multiple agencies weaponized against us. I've heard stories of doors being kicked down on anonymous tips here in Wyoming.
Happened right over here in Bighorn.
This is the kind of thing we've got to stop.
Okay. All right. So I mean, the larger point, and Ken and I have this conversation a lot. When you read the Second Amendment, it's clear. It says, shall not be infringed. And so really, to ask somebody, hey, what are you going to do to support our gun rights? Well, it's kind of contradictory because you shouldn't need to do anything.
You're absolutely right.
Clear enough.
There's no interpretation.
No.
Of that phrase. It's not for sportsmen. It's not for people to shoot clay pigeons. It's for us to defend ourselves and our rights. And it's to overthrow a tyrannical government should one arise and take the place of the one we've got now.
What are you going to do to restrain federal overreach into states? I mean, the 10th Amendment is pretty clear. But what we see a lot of is, unfunded mandates. The federal government passes a lot of laws that states have to comply with. So what would you do to restrain what we commonly refer to as federal overreach?
Well, an example of that was when Obama's EPA weaponized the Waters of the United States Act, and they declared as navigable waterways something that could be a seasonal pond on your ranch. And if you smoothed it out so your tractor could get through it better, and you didn't get the right permits, which you probably couldn't figure out how to, you're going to get thousands of dollars of fines a day. That was something that our team learned about, and we actually had an executive order for the president in his first term that pushed back against that hard. The federal government, it is like a cancer. We need to eliminate the Department of Education. Do you know that I think the average bureaucrat at the Department of Education makes 2 or 3 times what a Wyoming school teacher does?
Holy crap. 3 times?
2 or 3 times. Yeah, I don't think there's any benefit to the Department of Education. They've got loan portfolios that can go over to Treasury, but the idea that what we should teach our kids is something that should come from Washington, that's where we get the gender nonsense and the DEI stuff that we don't have any need for here. That's not education, that's indoctrination. So it's very important we draw that line. I think I'm eager to find out what I can do when I get there to hasten the end of the Department of Education. And then just look always to where can things be reined in? Where can more of the primacy, more of the decision-making go back to the states? Because that's what it's supposed to be. It's the states created the federal government, not the other way around.
Right.
And that's the balance that has to be reset.
Well, and I think if you talk to most Wyoming citizens, that would probably be, you'd probably hear that on their list of things that their representative or senator needs to do. And it usually comes out something like, how can you keep the government out of my business? And so let's talk about business for a minute. So across the country, and again, tax policy varies state to state. But in my opinion, we overburden business owners with high taxes, with high regulations. If you could you give me like and you're a business guy too, this ought to be pretty easy for you. So could you give me like the top 3 things you would do to ease things up for businesses, whether it be regulations or taxes, or what would you do?
Well, of course, the tax burden is an issue, but I would say that the thing that's going to help a lot of businesses across the country is if the cost of energy goes down. That's going to help every business to thrive. And that's where unlocking what we've got here in Wyoming is going to give the greatest benefit. So some longer term projects, I was thrilled to see that President Trump was pushing now for coal export through Oakland. That's going to be phenomenal for the state. I want to see a West Coast LNG port. I think if we've got another market for our gas to go to Taiwan and Japan, that's going to be phenomenal for the state. So broadly speaking, the role Wyoming has to play is that if we can do everything we can to advance energy, including uranium for small nuclear reactors, that's going to benefit businesses across the country. I'd like to see some major tax changes too. I'm not sure if what's going to work is a flat tax or but there just needs to be some simplification. I don't think the government should be in the process, in the business of keeping, H&R Block in business because the tax code is so difficult that we spend hours and hours and hours just with complying to figure out a number which I think in most other countries, they tell you what your tax bill is.
Yeah.
They say, pay here this much, but instead we've got to figure it out and they sit there waiting with gotchas if you made a little mistake and moved a decimal somewhere. So reforming our IRS would be a priority.
Okay. All right. No, I agree with you. And, when you talk to any business owner, whether they're, a small LLC or they own a pretty big business, I mean, its taxes end up being like the most burdensome thing. So another question I've had, and I'm kind of struggling with this myself, but the big topic right now is data centers. We're seeing an explosion of those in the state. Where are you at with those? Should we regulate them? Should we not? How would you suggest we deal with those? Or do we need to deal with them at all?
So, yeah, we've got to be careful how we use the resources of our state. It is kind of fun that we've gone from selling lots of coal to selling cold. But I think we should only have these things come in if they work for us. And I think the way we do that is we require them to build their own power generation and sell excess into the local grid. They should be here to drive our energy prices down. And secondly, we can't have them using our water. Maybe they get a little allotment, but it's got to be a closed loop system that they recycle. But, I've been watching a little more of Elon Musk's plans to put these in space. We might have a little bit of a bubble here. We might have this rush to start building these things. He might leapfrog the whole thing because you put these things up, you keep them pointed at the sun, you have infinite energy, and then you've got infinite cooling if you keep the backside of them pointed into the shadow. I think Elon saved the world when he bought X. He saved free speech. We were headed down a very dark path where the government was controlling who could say what and when and who would be punished for saying the wrong thing. And I think we've still got some surprises from Mr. Musk here in the data center world. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these things get half built and all of a sudden he's got a lower cost solution up there in space.
Yeah, and the free market side of me says, hey man, if you're jumping through all the hoops, if you're not getting government subsidies, we shouldn't even be involved in it. That you should be able to start your own business how you see fit, and so long as you're not infringing on other people's rights, the government shouldn't have any say in it. However, I think that there are other concerns. Certainly, private property. In Cheyenne, there's data centers going up in people's backyards, and I'm pretty sure nobody bought their property thinking, "Hey, I would like a data center next door." I'm pretty sure that doesn't happen. And so there are other concerns as it relates to data centers, and I really don't know how we deal with those because, like I say, the capitalist in me says, hey, we should just leave the businessman alone and let him, run his business the way he sees fit. I mean, I don't think that it's an easy question. How are you going to rein in the BLM?
So, again, that's more state primacy, more permit by rule. And what I really need to do is listen to the small operators in the state and get their insight as to, because they face just a plethora of regulations and hoops they have to jump through, repetitive environmental impact statements and delays. So what I want to do is get, solutions on paper and take them into Doug Burgum and say, this is what Wyoming needs. And with a little spreadsheet of, if we can open up this much more energy, we're going to have this many more jobs, we're going to have this many more opportunities for people in our state, and we're going to provide lower cost energy across the country. I think I'll be able to make that case.
All right. So here's a curveball for you. I'm going to put those headphones on. I got a caller that has a question for you. So let's see here. Let's talk to Jerry, our favorite fan. We talk to Jerry a lot. Jerry, how's it going today, my friend? Oh, maybe we got him. Maybe we don't. I don't think we have him. Well, anyway, what Jerry wanted to know is if what your feeling is on the Convention of States. If you're aware of that, he wants to hear your thoughts on that.
I'm very aware of the Convention of States.
Okay.
You know,
Talk to us.
Mark Meckler, the one of the leaders there, was also one of the founding members of Tea Party Patriots.
Keep going.
There we go. So I've been told that maybe I can take these off.
Yeah, you can.
I've been told that in folks that have examined the process of writing the Constitution, that there's a clear record of lengthy debate about many articles, and that the notion of amending the Constitution through a Convention of States was brought in, and it was all very limited debate, very limited. There was almost very quick consensus that the only way to modify the Constitution was through the federal government's congressional procedure that we've done, that we could be in a bind where the federal government would gain far too much control, and the states, which had formed the federal government, would be, on bended knee, as it were, to the federal government. And I believe that the Article 5 process provides a pathway for that balance of power to be reset. There are folks that are stuck on this with the notion that we would have a runaway convention, that is the fear that could happen. And I'm more persuaded about the potential for this to solve problems than the concern. I think that the thresholds of the number of states that have to actually call for the convention and the number of states that then have to authorize the amendment, I believe that that's an adequate safeguard against the notion of a runaway convention.
See, Steve, we were so close to being friends. So you and I actually disagree a great deal about this. And just, I think...
Again, in Congress, I'm a bystander in that process.
Yes, you don't get to do anything.
This is for... That's the beautiful thing about an Article 5 convention, is that it leaves the president, the Congress, I think even the governors are left aside. It's just state legislators that'll make that decision.
I think my biggest argument against it is that, well, the first convention was a runaway convention.
Arguably so.
A fact. So let me give you a couple of those. Okay, so one of Mark Meckler's books that was written from, well, I shouldn't say he wrote it, but it was for the Convention of States Action book.
Is it Mark Levin's book?
No, it's written by this guy named Michael Capek. He was the head of the Arizona chapter.
Okay.
Anyway, but it's the book that gets handed out to all legislators. It's called Conventions That Built America. In their book, it flat out says that the only mandate that convention had was to revise the Articles of Confederation. Truth is, the Virginia Plan was written way before it. And what happened is everybody showed up and they said, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're going to do something entirely different. And they scrapped the Articles of Confederation. The second thing they did, and this is also in the book, is that they reduced the voting threshold from unanimous to 3/4, because one reason is Rhode Island wasn't there. Rogue Island is what they were referred to. So they didn't even show up. But second, they knew that they were not going to get unanimous support for the Constitution. And so they changed the voting threshold. And in my opinion, that's a pretty good indication of what's going to happen here. And the last thing that I will say on this one, and we could debate this one for hours, but anyway, the last thing that I'll say is the very first thing that happens in any legislative body, not even legislative, any deliberative body, city council, county commissioners, state legislature, Congress, the very first thing you do is you pass the rules. And so where there are no rules written down about the Convention of States anywhere in any of our founding documents, what's going to happen is everybody's going to show up and they're going to say, hey, Steve, we think that everybody here should wear a bolo tie. Everybody vote for it, and then you have to wear a bolo tie. My point is that they can pass any rule that they want exactly the same way that it happened at the first Constitutional Convention. And to me, I think that it's a tremendous risk. And yes, it's in the Constitution, but I view it as kind of the axe behind the glass at the back of the room, break in case of emergency. As I just think it's a huge risk. But
my just analogous counterpoint to that would just be that you would know better than I do the number of, arguably red states that we have now versus blue states, and the power that's accruing to the blue states with the larger populations versus the red states having perhaps the window to use this tool. Again, with the notion of resetting the power balance between the federal and the states. And the things that are often on the menu are balanced budget amendment and so forth. So I just throw that on the table as another consideration.
Yeah, it's Ken. You want to
Yeah,
this.
I obviously have been quite outspoken about being opposed to an Article 5 convention. One of the things I always say is if we don't pay attention to the Constitution as it stands now, how much more are we going to pay attention to one that's revised? And you started to go down this road a minute ago. The goal of this is obviously most often term limits and a balanced budget. And I think there are some very good arguments against both of those items independently. And so I'm not only opposed to the idea that there might be a runaway or whatever, I'm opposed to what it's trying to achieve. I understand the sentiment, and I'm sympathetic to that, but it's a misdiagnosis, I feel. The problem is not the Constitution. The problem is voter apathy.
It's the people.
The problem is people not really paying attention. And I think we've proved that here in Wyoming.
Yeah, let me revise what I just said. We have a politician problem. We don't have a Constitution problem. And, if the state of Wyoming elects you as our next representative, who's to say that we can't elect you for the next 10 terms? I mean, if you're doing a great job and we want to keep you there, why shouldn't we be able to choose that? Similarly, why should anyone tell California whether they should elect Nancy Pelosi or not? I mean, we think that she's a horrible person.
Well, I got some reasons.
Well, I've got lots of reasons why, but her district obviously doesn't. Right? They kept electing her for, over and over and over. And so I think that there's, I agree with Ken that there are some valid concerns on both sides. I'm just not willing to, start changing the Constitution when I think that the problems that we are facing were not created by it. The problems we're facing is because we're not following it.
Those are wise words.
And so anyway, well, we pretty much burned up the rest of the program. I appreciate you taking a little bit more time.
I'm grateful for the chance. It's
very
very nice to
fun.
be here. You've got a really cool studio.
Thank you. So one more time, why don't you tell my audience how to get a hold of you, and then we'll wrap it up.
Absolutely. This is Steve Freeze. I'd love your vote on August 18th to be sent to D.C. to represent you, the state of Wyoming, for Congress. My website is freeze4wy, FRIESSFORWY.com. Give us a look, send us an email, reach out. We'll be traveling around the state. Hope we get a chance to shake hands.
All right. Thank you, Steve. That'll do it for today's installment of the broadcast. Don't forget about Weekend Update tomorrow. I have no idea what we're going to be talking about, but don't miss it.